Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Jack Revell Show. Today, I have Josh Smith on the show. Josh is the founder of a company called leadflow, which is an agency that focuses on leveraging technology to build and scale small businesses. Now, I'm super excited to talk to Josh today because I have heard Josh speak on Zoom calls and have had firsthand knowledge of his experience and his expertise. But I really was interested to get him on the show to talk today about what it's like running a small business in today's world and kind of how we can navigate this kind of crazy but exciting and very opportunity-filled world. And so Josh has come on to hopefully share some insights as to how he got to where he is today and maybe share some knowledge on how we can move forward in the right direction. So welcome to the show, Josh.
Thanks. Great to be here.
Thank you very much. So before we get on, let's just, I'd love to just sort of share with the listeners kind of a bit of background as to, who you are and kind of where you got to or how you got to where you are today. I'm right in saying, you're originally from Australia, but you're now living in the UK, and you've had a few businesses sort of started and sold on things in your time. But yeah, give us a bit of a background as to where you've come from and how you got to where you are.
Yeah, great question. I mean, in a lot of ways, I kind of wonder that myself. Like, I'm glad that you've got a big bottle there. I was like, oh, I should probably keep mine out and I'll just drink from a cup.
But I think we're matching, aren't we? We've both got these big 2-liter. Yeah, love it. These get filled up at least twice a day.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, to come back to your question, I don't know. Often, sometimes I kind of wonder myself, like, how did I get to kind of this point where kind of everything sort of works, and you have this business and this business works all over the world and all this kind of thing. And you're like, oh, like, how did it actually get here? And to be honest, I don't really know. I think a lot of the keys to building anything is just consistency and persistency over time, and really not sort of having kind of too much of an attachment of the exact steps to kind of get there. Like, I know I might get sort of shot for it, but a lot of people talk about this, goal focused and goal setting, all the rest of it. And I believe in that stuff to an extent, but the times for me personally, where I've been kind of the most effective over longer periods of time is when I've had intentions, and that intention would be more so in a direction versus actual waypoints, which are really easy to kind of throw you off when you miss those waypoints. You think, oh, this wasn't meant to happen this way or that way. So for a long time, I've just been following a set of intentions versus direct goals. And, basically 10 years later, I've done some pretty cool things, and, I've traveled the world doing it, and I've been very, very fortunate to work in some, crazy environments that, taught me a tremendous amount. And now I'm, small beach town bumpkin kid from Australia that had no intentions of ever being in business or being an entrepreneur. And living in the center of London, albeit in the peak of COVID, with a pretty cool business that serves, people all over the place. And it's often sobering for me. And often I don't really know how I got here. I just kept going in the direction and just kept fighting, even though sometimes you don't want to.
I like that. I think that, it's very humbling to hear that, you've sort of fallen into this, so to speak. And I think a lot of people that call themselves entrepreneurs tend to sort of tell a big story about how they got there. And it's usually some sort of rags to riches story, or, I found this idea and it came to, but, it's nice to hear that you've, as you said, fallen into it and didn't really expect to be in this position.
Yeah.
What do you think it takes to be an entrepreneur in this world that we live in currently?
Well, I mean, talking in an evergreen sense, I think a level of naivety is important. I think I look back to when I started, and if I went in with all the facts that I now have, like, there's just no way that I would have started, because it's hard, like, you get tested at every single level along the way. And it's, there are moments where, like, you feel like your soul's being destroyed, and there are moments where you feel so elated that you couldn't imagine being anything else. So I think, starting a business in any time, if you have no business experience or whatever, you've got to have a level of, being okay with not knowing what you don't know, and, being okay with being, consciously incompetent and just going down the rabbit hole. Like, it works for me. I'm not saying it works for everyone. But yeah, I mean, a mix of naivety, being vulnerable, being okay with not knowing the answers. I think that's really key for starting a business. But saying that as well, like there is a level of having some realistic structure around what you're trying to achieve as well, because if you don't, that will tend to impact you negatively at some point. And admittedly, when I started, like I didn't really have much of a plan, but I've been okay with like running into the walls and bouncing off them as I've gone. And that doesn't work for everyone, but it's just kind of been my process. And unfortunately, it has worked. But yeah, level of naivety, being okay, not knowing the answers, and then just really learning and being prepared to know that you don't have to be making your millions straight away. You don't have to be you don't have to be barely paying your bills at the start. Just take the lessons, because like they're really valuable, and at some point the scales do tend to tip, and you kind of sort of figure it out. But I mean, if you want to be like really kind of specific and look at the times we're in now, starting a business, I think yeah, I mean, starting a business today, if I had never had any experience, I'd obviously be pretty cautious, because there are a lot of things happening that are changing rapidly, and it's hard to predict a lot of things. I think in our generation, probably the generation before, like I don't think we've seen this level of uncertainty and predictability. So it's hard to do things like build a business in this current sort of landscape. But if I was to do it and start from scratch, it would be, a case of trying to really read the play and see, all right, well, the world's obviously changed quite drastically in a very short period of time. Realistically, 12 months, really, everything's kind of gone the way it has. So what's coming next? How are people going to be living their lives, building their business, spending their money, doing whatever there is going forward? Like, how do you build for that with whatever product or service or brand that you might create going forward?
What you said about having, first of all, intention versus goals, I think that's a really key point, because it's so easy to set goals. We're recording this just before the end of the year, but it will probably go out in the new year. But people are going to be doing a lot of goal setting. It's that standard January. Oh dear, what am I doing with my life? Let's fix some things in the diary and make sure they happen. Yeah. But if that actually just changing that mindset to having an intention rather than a goal, how do you think that helps someone maybe become more purposeful about actually achieving it, rather than having something that's just in the diary or in the pipeline ready to happen?
Yeah. So I mean, with goals, it's very easy in my experience, is that when I don't achieve something that's very specific, and it can kind of knock me out and think, oh, well, I'll just put it off and I'll recalibrate later, and I'll just do whatever I want in the meantime, and then figure out and come back to it. When you have intentions and directions, it gives you more of a leeway to kind of fall off the horse here and there, and then sort of get back on it. People aren't perfect. People aren't perfect in their actions. It's staying consistent enough for the time a lot of the time. And in many ways, it's also a lot more difficult today, because we have influence around us that we didn't have when you and I were kids. So I mean, some would look at us and still say we are kids. But when we were like younger and that, we didn't have things like Facebook and Instagram and all these bits and pieces that are showing these other people living lives that seem so perfect and on track and all the rest of it. And it's very hard to kind of measure up to that all the time if we're measuring ourselves against people that are showing us a small fraction of their lives, which always looks perfect and in a row. So yes, I mean, looking at intentions versus goals, intentions, like, for me, they seem to just kind of show the path to be on, versus like the very sort of narrow stepping stones that if you miss, you fall into the river that has, rushing rapids that kind of pull you one way or the next.
It comes down to that mental model comes to mind, which is map versus terrain. And the map is essentially what you're talking about in terms of like the what everyone else is doing. I've seen it happen on Instagram, or that guy is doing really well with this particular model, or that person's doing super well with that format they've got. But actually, when you get into it and you actually start walking the map that you've looked at on a piece of paper, and there's that terrain, as you said, there's a river you need to cross, or there's a bunch of trees you need to get through, or there's a massive hill you need to go over. Like, the whole game changes, and you've got to be really flexible. And there's a Tony Robbins quote, which I'm probably going to butcher, but it sort of feels relevant. But it's like, if you stay committed to your intention but stay flexible to your approach, you will always fare okay, because you'll be able to essentially tackle the hurdles and tackle the obstacles as they come.
Yeah.
What do you think have been the biggest obstacles and hurdles that you have had to overcome this year in relation to where you are in your life and your business?
Well, COVID was a big one for us, as it is for everyone. So I don't want to harp on too much about it. But going into COVID, well, the reason I moved to the UK, which is almost 5 years ago, I came up here to build a business called We Fill Events. So you can kind of imagine what we did as a service, right? So over 4.5 years being up here, like we sort of grew quite quickly and built a really good network. We clients kind of everywhere, and we're building like a really good brand. And then the world went into the toilet, especially according to live events. And like there was this period around March where we're just like rapidly trying to just triage clients that have spent a lot of money trying to promote all these different events in different places. And all of a sudden they're not being able to do it, and then having to grapple with venues and all that kind of stuff that had gone into, the shitstorm, for lack of a better word. So we just kind of like triaged the live events that we had with our clients that had imminent events that were kind of getting shut down, that have, they'd spent significant funds to get filled, and not even filling, just all the bits that go into live events, right? There's so many logistical pieces. So the first challenge was navigating through that, so our clients were as safe as they possibly could have been, and as much of their risk kind of brought down. So that was challenge number one, getting through that period, transitioning to sort of the online space to carry out the events that have been committed to, all the rest of it. So we got that kind of out the way. And then there was like a little bit of a lull in the battle, if you want, after that. And then, everything started going sort of really quiet. And then it was like, all right, cool. Got to rebuild, got to start from scratch. If I look back over this year, there wasn't much of not on my end, I think with my time, there wasn't much of a down period in that my tools were down. I'm like, oh, I've got nothing to do. We just kind of kept running and kept just going at it. And we still had plenty of people saying, look, what do I do next? And we transitioned from doing a lot of like We Fill events, direct work, to a lot of kind of bespoke private consulting. And then that kind of bled on into lead flow, which came about off the back of a lot of the chaos. So I guess, a real challenge was making sure that our live events clients were safe going into what was a really stressful period for them. And then after that, it was, kind of starting again from scratch, I guess, after that point. Yeah.
So what do you think is the biggest insight that you've taken from that whole experience?
That nothing is certain. I've always tried to kind of live by that anyway, because things do change really, really rapidly. I think this year has probably highlighted that for most people, that everything kind of is subject to change as and when it wants to. I remember being in Australia in January, had just come back, had just run an event with Dent. We were talking about them a minute ago. And then within a few weeks after running that live event, just like everything just shifted. So this year was a big lesson in things moving really fast, and nothing is can be taken for granted. So I think that's always a pretty important lesson to kind of hold. And then, secondly, just the value of building a really good reputation and looking after people has been probably one of the other key reasons why this year hasn't been that much of a struggle in terms of what it could have done it commercially for us, if you want, because we've been so consistent for a long time doing good work for people, looking after them. It didn't impact us at a commercial level going forward when, we were the people that, others came to, and it's like, I don't know what to do next. Like, what do I do? What do I do with my marketing? Where do I go from here? We were getting that sort of call, and that's off the back of a lot of years of consistency and being sort of intention led around actually being a good business and supporting, brands to do their best work and so on.
There's a big movement this year specifically around people wanting to grow fast, because as much as there's been this devastation in the world and everything's gone tits up, so to speak, there's been a lot of people that have harnessed that opportunity to say, yeah, this is the time for me to shine and to grow and to build and to, put myself out there. but there's been a lot of pressure on kind of trying to grow quickly. I mean, you just have to go onto Instagram and flick through to see the amount of people that are starting businesses and promoting themselves and pivoting, so to speak. What is your opinion on people growing fast versus people growing smart?
Yep, good question. There is a quote, and I'm probably going to butcher it. I don't think you butchered your quote at all. I think it was probably pretty good. But it was in one of the Facebook groups that you and I would be a part of, and it was Dan Priestley who put it up in there, and it was around the percentage growth rates that most businesses actually experience but in comparison to this perception of how fast that we need to grow. And the gist is that, everyone's running around talking about how, they're going to try and double next year and all the rest of that, etc. But the actual stat is that I think it was either 7 or 0.7% of companies in the UK struggle to grow by 20% at minimum a year. And if you're doing that, you're like in the upper kind of echelon. So I think people do put too much of an emphasis on breaking records and growing fast. But if you have that approach, you'll often break things or miss things or sort of skip steps that you meant to take in building strong businesses. For me on our end, we've always had an agency model, and it's very, very easy to break if you move fast. So there's always been a level of really careful growth. We've been able to do our numbers, and we're not trying to double every year, but we're growing every year consistently, and we have been without skipping a step, which is great. But it hasn't been through an aggressive focus to dominate the market or do all this fancy stuff. It's just been, all right, cover your bases, do really good work, look after the people coming through, and that's how you will grow. It's not the rapid sort of model if you want. We're not throwing thousands of pounds at ads every day or doing any of that kind of thing at all. It's just by covering our bases really, really well. And that has been our not secret.
It's funny because so many people will think when you start a business or when you even have a business that the measurables are kind of revenue, profit and loss and net and gross. And it's mostly focused around money. If somebody said to you, how much have you grown your business in terms of reach or maybe impact or kind of growth in another way that's not monetary, a lot of people probably wouldn't have a clue. They wouldn't understand what you meant. And yet, as you said, there is a lot more focus this time around, actually focusing on the things that do move the needle in the right way, which is the people that come through your business, the clients that you serve, the people that are associated with you, whether it's staff or associates or colleagues. Those are the people that actually, if they weren't there, your business wouldn't be afloat in the first place.
Yep, that's correct. And I'm also one that really believes that you take a lifetime building a reputation, you can blow it in with one post on Facebook, with one shitty email or something, and that's quite crazy. For us, financial benchmarks are not anything that I measure the business by. That's just a byproduct of actually, as cheesy as that sounds, it's just a byproduct of doing good work consistently, and before you know it, the bank's sorting itself out and you're not worrying about that. It's going, cool, how do I sort of go a next step further without breaking the business and maintaining quality and then growing up another level? That tends to be the bigger challenge, especially if you're in service-based. Service-based business is a different beast to product-based.
Well, it's an emotional beast, isn't it, you're dealing with, rather than a logical one. Dean Gravioski, you probably said his name very wrong, but he talks about how you've got two types of buyers. You've got a logical buyer and an emotional buyer. And the illogical buyer is the one that will look at the numbers. They'll look at the value. They'll look at okay, what I'm getting for this versus that, and the sort of the numbers around it. Whereas the emotional buyer will look at it as, what do I gain from buying this product? And that's what the service industry has to deal with on a big basis, is that, I'm a life coach, so I work with people based on trying to transformation, and that's what I sell. It's I can help you get from where you are now to where you want to be and create that amazing transformation for you, and it's going to cost you this many pounds, right? But some people, if they're not looking for that, will look at that and go, well, is it worth it? Do I really need that? Maybe I could do it by myself. Whereas others who have been maybe stuck in that rut for however many months or years beforehand see that as an opportunity to finally get thrown the rope to get them out of the hole that they're in, and so then throw themselves at it. But you're right, the marketing and the sort of the approach that you've got isn't money based. It's emotional based. It's talking to someone's deep needs and wants and desires to get them to kind of move towards what you've got as an offer.
Yeah.
What do you think is, sort of talking about measurables, the things that people then should be concentrating on going forward? Because we've spoken that money isn't one that necessarily is one that, gets you more, it gets more money in the bank, but doesn't necessarily build your business in the right way. So what are the things you think would people should be focusing on most when it comes to building a business?
Yeah, I mean, if we're looking at, because I guess there are a few different degrees to that question and a few different levels of business owners and stages that they're in and all the rest of it. If you're more in that kind of starting phase, building a little bit pre-VAT threshold, if you want, you've got to nail your service to the point where you're really confident that every time you roll it out, you know what you're doing. It's more or less predictable to an extent. And have your ducks in a row like that. And that's foundation level bits and pieces that you need to be pretty aware of. When you're clear about that value and you understand how to deliver it repeatedly and it's somewhat predictable, cool. Then you work on, right, well, can I scale this? Do I have it at a point where I could handle 2 a week, 4 a week, 10 a month, whatever your numbers, whatever your service, etc. And then sort of work to that capacity that you have, and then figure out how, okay, cool. Well, how do I communicate this value if I'm not doing it well? How do I structure what it is that I'm doing so that other people understand it and come to me versus necessarily chasing the market perhaps and trying to yell louder than everyone else around you? Because we're living in really noisy environments now, like noisier than they've ever been. It's hard to market and advertise yourself in these times. Like, we've got everything blowing up around us that's distracting us. So yeah, there's a few levels, but first level for me is always just making sure you're really good at what you do, because that will speak volumes and that will carry itself, and that will sustain you for the years to come when you have people reaching out to you that you hadn't heard of, and people that you haven't spoken to in years. It just tends to swing itself around. So if you're in it for the long game, and if you're not sort of trying to get in and out, which, the game will find you out quick enough anyway. But if you're in it for the long sort of haul, just do what you do really, really well, to the point where you're not disputed. You can't be disputed. I'm not saying you have to like own the market or whatever, like that's a fool's game, I think, unless you got a lot of money and resource and the rest of it. But just be really focused on being great at what you do.
I think that's a really nice actual insight you just said there about how to trying to control the market. I think a lot of people will enter into business or open a business thinking like, I'm going to just be, big and famous and status and that sort of thing. And it actually just takes away from the fact that actually you're not going to have a business unless you serve that one person well enough for them to actually go off and tell somebody else about how good your business was to them. There's a guy, I talk about him quite a bit, called Kevin Kelly. I think he's the editor of Wired magazine. And he's got this great video online that's called 1,000 Fans. And he talks about how you don't need 1 million followers. You don't need thousands of subscribers on YouTube, all this sort of stuff. You just need 1,000 super fans. And they're the people that buy your product, share what you say, repost everything you post. And they're the ones that will essentially be your advertising. They'll be your marketing. They'll be the ones that will tell all their friends about what you do. And actually, subsequently, you'll have 1 million followers through those 1,000 super fans. I think that is something that a lot of people don't actually concentrate enough on, is having those people that they can just go, yeah, Ben is my ideal client, or Lucy is the person that I need to have in my business because I can help her do that thing that she's always wanted to do.
Yeah, I agree. Unfortunately, we're just not conditioned to that way of believing. And coming back to our Instagram and Facebook and all the rest of it, we we are just trained now just to see the polar extremes of everything, and it just attracts us in many parts to want to have that as well. Versus really just coming back to basics and going, cool, well, what's the actual real first step to getting anywhere near that? It's very, and coming back to goals as well, it's very easy to drop off from goals when your goals are, we talk about big and hairy goals like it's a saying, but it's like, a lot of them they're bullshit, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
In my opinion, people have different opinions, but.
Absolutely. Look, I wanted to ask you about a nickname that I found that you've been described as a secret weapon in the digital marketing space. Tell me more about that.
I don't know. I think I can't remember who even gave that to me.
It's quite a title.
Yeah, I mean, I've had a few different titles like that, but it's kind of, it's like a love-hate thing with it, to be honest. Because like the problem with sayings like that is that people reach out to you, and there can be like a level of expectation that you're going to fix their universe and all the rest of it with what you can do with your marketing or advertising approach or whatever. But eh, most of my stuff just comes back to doing the key basic things really, really well, and sort of trying to help different clients that come to me get their ducks in a row so that they can capitalize on good principles and values and all the rest of it. So yes, I mean, yeah, I don't know. I don't really like too much of the outlandish stuff like that, but I just good at helping good businesses. Like that's the key thing as well. Do, the right things well, and then over time and consistency, like that tends to pan out.
Well, if you're not a big fan of outlandish talking about this sort of thing, I'll help the listeners in telling everyone that Josh is a very good communicator. From the shows and the episodes of Zoom and the courses that I've done of his, I found his communication skills extremely easy to follow, but also very knowledgeable, just like straight to the point of what you need to know. None of this kind of like fluff and trying to make it harder than it is. It's just to the point, which I found super beneficial and super valuable. So one thing I did want to ask you about is how important is communication? We talk about this noisy world we live in and the fact that you just can't be heard for life or Mary. And so like how is communication best used to be able to be heard and hold up that red umbrella amongst all the black ones?
Yeah, cool. Great question, and thanks as well for that compliment. I'll take that. I appreciate that. But yeah, I mean, and sort of come back to that as well. Like in my space in particular, there is a lot of noise and people teaching a lot of the stuff I teach. Like there's a lot of bits behind the curtain which don't get revealed, and I don't subscribe to that at all. And I'm also not trying to sell anything when I'm teaching either. Like that's not my model. Not that it doesn't work, because it does, but it's not mine. So I just find be really clear and basic and to the point as I can with my content, because we're all confused enough as it is anyway. So there's no point in me making anyone's life any harder, right? But then in terms of like communication itself, like for me, like I guess communication is vital, particularly when I'm working with my clients, because like I know that I don't have very long, if I'm say running some ads or running a funnel or whatever you want to call it for like different clients, I don't have much time when someone is coming to a landing page or reading an offer or listening to a video, whatever it might be, to get them to take the desired action. So therefore I have to communicate very clearly and purposefully as I possibly can to get that action to happen relatively quickly. Otherwise people are gone. And with attention spans shorter and shorter than they've ever been, I have to communicate effectively to make sure that I can do my job really well. And fortunately, that tends to bleed out into other aspects of my life and my career in terms of teaching, like you've experienced, and our own branding and so on. And yeah, like if you look at my first real success was with We Fill events, coming over here with that. Like we were so clear with that brand, like you couldn't misinterpret it at all because it was straight on the front of the tin. And there's a term for it called run seal marketing. Run seal is you've probably heard of it.
I do know.
Maybe listen to me mention it before that as well. But yeah, just the idea of Run Seal is a paintball. It's like a hardware company, and everything they sell is on the tin, so you don't have to like wonder what any of it is. And I really subscribe to that as well, because it's very hard to get noticed. It's very hard to get attention and then earn focus long enough to get people to do something with it. So you may as well cut to the chase without being too direct to the point where you don't have any taste. Like there's a level of balance that you've got to kind of figure out. But yeah.
I love it. It's so simple when you say it. As I said before, the way in which you explain it just makes sense. But I think maybe a question from me personally, but as well as I'm sure other people listening, would be communication in today's world isn't just two-dimensional. It's like back in the day, it used to just be that you put a newspaper article out or maybe you sent someone an email. But now we've got so many different ways we can communicate with people. What is, in your opinion, the way which you can really give the most value in the shortest amount of time to catch that attention span?
It's a great question, and there's lots of roads that you could go down with it. If I was to kind of try to single out the best kind of way, I mean, it's ultimately comes, well, the bigger, assuming we're talking like commercially, businesses trying to sell services, those services aren't necessarily cheap. Ultimately, there's a few conversations that need to be had at a few different levels. So it's not necessarily what's the best. It's okay, what's the bits and what are the conversational bits that have to be added up to the point where you can have a meaningful conversation with someone that trusts you enough to make that purchase of sorts. So like I can tell you for a fact that if you're advertising to a stranger, you are not, unless you win the lottery type odds, going to convert them into a $2,000 type coaching package or whatever with one single ad that says the right things. Like that, it doesn't exist. Unless you're really lucky, right? But it's about stacking different touch points. It's about understanding those touch points where people are as they're experiencing you and your brand. And often people are sitting on the fringes and the sidelines, just seeing the things that you do over a period of time and working out how you have those conversations, engineer those conversations along those tracks where people are experiencing you in different kind of chunks to the point where they're ready to have meaningful conversations that are going to close a sale or do whatever it is that you're asking at that point in time. So, so don't have a silver bullet for you in that sense that there's like one key part, but I really think it's about combining as many as you can, automating what you can to a point without being too robotic with your brand. And, you know, over time it tends to come together.
I'm going to give this simplified communication a go and try and wrap that up into what came out for me, which was kind of just mastering the art of showing up.
Mm-hmm. Yep, showing up as many places as you can consistently as well. And you know, I have this methodology which works pretty well, and it's pretty good at simplifying things. It's called the MATE methodology, and it's my kind of thing for just making marketing a lot easier than what it actually is. MATE stands for messaging, audience, timing, and execution. It works on a few levels. It works because it's simple, but it also works because I'm Australian and it kind of matches the whole Aussie thing. But what it essentially translates down to is saying the right thing to the right person, doing it at the right time, and doing it in the right way. And if you can understand that concept, you can start going, cool, all right, here's my product of X, here's my service of Y. It costs this, it's this significant because X, Y, Z. How do I start breaking that down in terms of conversations? How do I have conversations about this, and who am I trying to speak about this to? What are the timings and the relationships that I probably need to have with people to be able to position myself to be able to sell this? And then, you know, when those pieces kind of come together and you workshop them out appropriately, you tend to be able to create a pretty good system for marketing anything with what I believe is a pretty basic framework, which kind of makes the whole thing less daunting.
And I think I love that. I think that first of all is super easy to remember, let alone kind of compute in your mind. I've done a lot of work on neuroscience and the brain and how we absorb information and how we kind of translate information at the same time. And one thing that I never knew, but the brain, the front brain, the conscious mind is actually only able to take in something like 5 to 7 bits of information at any one time. Everything else goes back into the subconscious mind, which is basically our library. And someone explained to me, said once that the subconscious mind the conscious mind is a great decision maker, but a terrible library. So don't try and compact everything in at once. So using something like that, like an anagram or a metaphor or something that says, follow this format in everything you do, and you will be able to make sense of every bit of marketing, advertising, communication that you put forward in your business, I think is great. And I think we need more of that in this world, because there is so much confusion as to what to follow and who to buy from and how to sell and how to even communicate your ideas in your head into something that makes sense. So yeah, I think that's for me anyway, it works very, very well.
Yeah, cool, thanks.
Josh, what are your personal philosophies on sort of life in general, in terms of how you approach difficult situations, kind of, things that maybe are something that you've come across that you're like, I don't know how to deal with this, but I'm going to use this philosophy to figure it out?
Yeah, good question. I kind of have two, and these two have been relatively consistent for me for a long time. First one is don't do things in halves, which is pretty true for me. Like I've been pretty good for a long time at just running at things, often when I haven't wanted to, but then I get like a little voice in my head that says, "Oh, well, it's not how you do things. You got to go out and get after it." But the second one is if I can't, then I must, I guess, which is probably the key driver for me, especially over the last decade, because there are a lot of things that I felt that I couldn't do. And therefore I must, and that has twisted my arms in many situations where I could have gone the other way. And like speaking, for example, in public or what have you, like when I started this, there was no way that you would have had me even on a podcast like this, I suppose. But speaking in front of people, like just the idea of being able to string coherent thoughts together in a room of other people with their own thoughts going on, like that just used to terrify me. But having a mantra like if I can't, then I must, then and really believing it as well. You can't just say pretty things to yourself that sound great or look good on a t-shirt. Like you got to commit to it, and it's not easy, but after time it does start becoming a lot easier to kind of go about it. But yeah, those would be the two things that have kind of driven me a lot.
I interviewed a guy called Ben Aldridge who came on the show not too long ago and talked about his book, which is called How to Be Comfortable Being Uncomfortable. So 43 different ways in which you can basically build your mindset and sort of increase your resilience. And what you just said there is a great example of how you could just lean into that discomfort of the things that you know that you don't want to do, but no, you should be trying to see if it's something you do want to do. And I think so many people come from this space of a fixed mindset of like, oh, I was crap at maths when I was at school, so therefore I can't be an accountant, or I didn't like the school trip I went on once, so I'm never going to like traveling to another country, or whatever it might be. But it's this fixed mindset actually stops people growing so much more than anything else in life. I think it's a sad reality that actually if people started stepping outside their comfort zone into what I like call it the stretch zone, and really stretching your world and stretching your abilities and stretching what really makes you happy. You never know what you can find. And the thing is, a lot of people don't actually know what the world has to offer them until they go out and offer themselves to the world.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And, what I'll say as well, like to kind of like probably finish that one off for you as well, is that not cutting you off by any stretch. Sorry, didn't mean that to come across that way. Is that you'd be surprised at what you can get used to and what you can actually then come to enjoy, and then the benefits that sort of come after that, right? So like if I look at the whole speaking thing, which used to be like a catastrophic fear, committing to that and kind of getting over it. Like every time I'll do anything, like there's always like a little bit of butterflies. It's just the trick is getting into kind of fly in formation, as my buddy Paul Dunn will say. But like the biggest ever deal that I've done in a single oneer came directly off the back by going, we'll do some of these events. And it was for like the UK government, and it was like pretty big thing. And it was like validation that says, yes, you committed to doing something that you didn't think you could at one point, and you've done it consistently over a period of time. Here's your payment for committing to that. Well done, son. Go get the next one. So you'd be surprised at what you can get used to and actually enjoy that you couldn't imagine being able to actually do at one point or another.
Exactly. And it comes back to what we say about just showing up and just showing the world what you're available to do. I'm not sure if I've shared this story with anyone on the podcast, but earlier in the year, I kind of COVID hit my industry quite hard. For those of you who don't know, I've spent the last 10, 12 years in the modeling and acting industry. That was what I did before kind of coaching became more of my focus. And at the very beginning of the year, when everything hit the fan, I was like, right, well, that industry's died. I need to sort of figure how am I going to get money in the bank? So I started doubling down on my coaching, and I basically started showing up every single day online with just videos about stuff that was on my mind, whether it's like resilience or clarity or motivation, whatever it was. And I did this consistently for about 2 or 3 months. And then out of the blue, I got this woman contact me who was from quite a big online fitness company saying, hey, we'd love to interview you to be one of our new fitness trainers. And I sort of remember looking at the message thinking, what, me? What? I don't have anything to do with fitness on my page. Like, what's going on? And I kind of queried and said, like, thank you so much for the opportunity, but why me? And what she said back really resonated with what kind of I didn't see myself, but had, was given the insight into, which was she didn't want to hire me because of the fact that I was a trainer or a fitness person, because she's got plenty of those to choose from. She wanted to hire me because of the way that I was showing up every day and the way that my personality was coming across in these videos that I was posting on Instagram. And she said, we've been following you for a couple of months and we just love how consistent and how, much energy you give to the things you clearly care about. And we just think that if you were to be put in a position where you could help people on a bike or on a treadmill, whatever it might be, you could do the same for them in that respect. So, I think even though you go out with intention to do something, other people see it from a different perspective and may actually give you more opportunity than what you necessarily wanted in the first place by just being yourself and putting yourself out there and pushing yourself outside your comfort zone.
Agree. Yeah, completely agree. That's a good win. That's a
good
story.
I didn't get the gig, but it was still it's a good story to tell, but also it's more of an understanding that what I do isn't just focused around what I think, coaching or kind of helping people. It can expand to different areas. Me doing a podcast, for example, could resonate with a bunch of people who have started a business in the last 6 months, or it could resonate with someone who doesn't have a business but just likes the philosophies we're talking about, or just likes listening to a conversation and it keeps them company for an hour or so. The different ways in which content or communication can come across to people, I think, are very it's important, but it's also, you don't know how it hits someone until it's hit them. And so I think for me, it's like I want to put out as much as I possibly can so that people can connect with me in as many different ways as possible. It comes out to, there's a quote I read years ago. It's like, the more you tell, the more you sell. And whether that be selling something as a product or a service, or whether it's just selling you as a person and getting more people to kind of buy into who you are and helping them through whatever they're going through.
Yeah, agree, completely agree.
Josh, I wanted to talk about niches and this big fat word that I find funny because it's kind of a bit of a mystical word. It's like a bit of a unicorn that flies through the sky that no one can really catch or understand or know anything about. But like, niche is thrown around so much in, I know in my industry specifically, but I know in a lot of industries. How important is a niche?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think it's vitally important, and I know the difference between having a niche and not having a niche, and the contrast in results that I've experienced in my my own career to this point. So I mean, purely based on the back of my journey to date, the times when I've not been niched, which was pre being in London, I guess. You're left to compete with the masses. You are very rarely heard unless like you're the pinnacle of that industry, which is obviously difficult to get to, as opposed to having a niche where that is really dialed in and actually is a niche, where the opportunities just flow to you because you're very easy to find, and two, you're not really competing with anyone. So for example, pre being in London and sort of pre being in Silicon Valley for a little bit, my partner and I, we were just a digital marketing agency really, and we could do everything, and we were very good at it. Whatever you wanted, we could do it, and we were branded as such. And as a result, we looked cool, but we looked the same as everyone else, more or less, and we sounded the same as everyone else. And as a result, we got results in proportion to our profiles, which weren't big at all. So enough to make a living, not enough to kind of set your world on fire, right? And then leading into some shifts, and as we sort of became We Fill events, we were the exact same business technically, capability wise, and what we could deliver. We just put a different brand on it, and we decided, cool, we're not going to do all of this digital marketing stuff for anyone that wanted to hire us because we can technically do the work. We're going to take a level of experience, which was predominantly live events. We're doing a lot of live events in the other agency, and we're just going to solely focus on that. I'll get on a plane and come up here and see what happens in a city like London. And before you know it, like people understood exactly what we were trying to do. We didn't have competitors. We were having people just reach out from all over the planet. And we were catching the attention of people in this industry who really understood what we were trying to do based on that brand. Daniel Priestley being one of them. And the fact that we carved out this really good niche, and we didn't have direct competitors that weren't other agencies saying, oh yeah, we could fill your events. We were the only agency that were filling events. We just catapulted really, really quickly off the back of it, to the point where I couldn't see myself doing anything going forward that isn't hyper niche driven, because in a niche that you really own and do well in, you just tend to not have to compete, and you tend to get a lot more opportunities, I find, without having to really fight for it, advertise for it. So that's my experience.
Okay. Thank you for explaining that. But what I want to ask you is what the difference is between a niche and a hyper niche. Like where do you draw that line between sort of something that maybe someone would search for, like you said, maybe digital advertising, versus something that it's so niche that someone wouldn't even search for it? Where do you draw that line?
Good question. I don't have the direct answer for you on that. I guess maybe if it was the difference between being, a dog groomer for German Shepherds and being a dog groomer for German Shepherd puppies, maybe that's the line. I don't know. But yeah, I don't think I have much experience in going hyper niche versus being sort of hyper niche.
So with a hyper niche, are you talking about, for example, something within a sector? So let's take your industry, digital marketing. Digital marketing would that be the industry, or would that be the niche?
Sorry, let me put a notification down. Can you repeat that? Sorry.
Yeah, I just said, so if you're looking at an industry, is the industry of digital marketing, right? Is that an industry, and then you niche into that, or is digital marketing the niche itself?
I think digital marketing is a niche, but a very, very wide niche.
Mm-hmm.
Filling events via digital marketing is taking that niche a bit further. Filling events via digital marketing that's purely Facebook ads, that's another level down as well.
So it's using, I suppose, it's finding the use of the industry or the niche that you're in. So it's like, okay, we're a digital marketing agency, but we fill events with our digital marketing agency experience.
Correct. Pretty much. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Because I think a lot of people, I've spoken to quite a few people with not just setting up my own business, but obviously doing lots of these podcasts and Instagram lives and stuff like that, is people struggle with necessarily being kind of okay with pinpointing themselves. So like putting that stake in the ground and saying, this is who I am, and this is the flag I'm flying. This is the industry, the niche, the super niche, whatever you want to call it, that I've decided to run with. Yeah. And people get scared because they're like, I'm scared of, I'm not going to attract that person, and I'm not going to be able to, that person's going to run away from me because I'm not like their perfect person. How do people get over that?
Yeah, I agree. I see that a lot as well. People panic that they think they're closing too much of the doors and windows to sort of everyone. But when you try to be something for everyone, you tend to be very little to most people, which I tend to see happen quite frequently, which is a shame. But what I also see happen, and it's my experience as well, is that the more you niche and get really good at your niche, you can't then help but be really attractive to everyone else who wants to work with you. And you're saying, oh, it doesn't really fit my scope or whatever. Because then what tends to happen is that you have people come to you that then aren't within your niche, but they like what you do so much that they're persistent, and they're willing to create opportunities that you probably can't afford to say no to. And that's, for example, how, we came about one of our training gigs with the government that was very, very lucrative, wasn't in line with anything that we were actually doing. But we built a brand very quickly to support what they wanted us to do, because, our hyper niching had drawn that kind of attention. So if you want to work with the masses, I would say get your training wheels on and figure out what that niche is first. Do that really, really well. And then opportunities will flow as a result of being good at your niche. Otherwise, if you try to be a generalist too much to an extent, you likely won't succeed. Not to be sort of, put people down or whatever, but it's very, very hard to be a generalist in this day and age. But yeah, get your niche done, and then you can experience a lot more success
Mm.
doing generalist type work if you think that there are more opportunities there. But yeah, I would just challenge people to explore having a niche, because it has changed my experience of business dramatically on more than one occasion now.
I suppose as well, you don't have to always stick with that niche. You know, if you do it
No.
for a month or 2 months, 6 months, whatever, you can always adapt, change, pivot, whatever the word is. I mean, a lot of people have probably done that this year without realizing, and are
Correct.
now talking to new customers they thought they never would have to talk to, but now they see that as their business.
Yeah, correct. And I mean, you should likely have some level of an awareness going into a niche that there is a demand there. If you don't, then you probably need to work on that a little bit before committing to it. But for instance, when we went from digital marketing agency to We Fill Events, which was a digital marketing agency purely for filling live events, we were very clear that that would be a good niche because a lot of our clients were already doing that. We were tapped in enough to the space to know that speakers and companies everywhere struggle to consistently do the hardest part to live events in many senses, which is putting people in the room. And that's what we could do. So we were very confident. So having that confidence in a niche that can work is probably important as well at the start.
It also helps with lead generation, which is something that, I find such a funny tool because lead generation is what everyone needs. It's you won't have a business unless you have leads coming in. But the world we live in today is actually so easy to get leads because there's so much technology and there's so much information. There's so many ways in which to leverage and generate that. So at the moment, I know that you work quite closely with Dent and Daniel Priestley and those guys. What currently are your sort of top tips, if you like, on leveraging technology to get more business, get more sales, to get more leads, to get more sort of things in the door?
Yeah, cool. So for me, like I'll always come back to basics with that as well and go, cool, well, make methodology, saying the right thing to the right person, the right time and in the right way. Who am I trying to go for? Okay, cool. Figure out everything I can around that audience that I'm trying to speak to. Great. All right. So in order to have my conversations with them, like where am I likely to kind of find them? Are they LinkedIn, Facebook, whatever? It's somewhat, say, kind of irrelevant, but knowing who they are first and foremost is key. And then in terms of doing the execution part, how do you do it? There's countless tools out there to generate leads in loads of weird and wonderful ways. You got Facebook ads, you got LinkedIn ads. You don't have to use ads at all. You can use LinkedIn in a range of different ways. You can use partnerships to drive traffic, all that kind of thing. I guess you just have to consider is how can you generate the most value for leads coming in? Like what can you do to deliver as much value to them coming into your sphere, into your brand, if you want. That you can sort of support them on their journey and getting to know you. So is that a scorecard? Is that a webinar? Is it a live event when we can kind of do them? Is it a digital version of a boardroom, for example? Just so many ways to kind of skin the cat. It's about what kind of value can you impart quickly with new leads and how can you extend that relationship as they spend more time with you? So it's kind of like,
I find it interesting as well that people have all these tools and resources available to them, but yet they don't necessarily use them in the most efficient way. One thing that comes to mind is virtual assistants. There are so many tasks that we do on a day-to-day basis as business owners and as entrepreneurs that we don't need to do. We could actually get someone else to be doing them for us. And I think two people come to mind. Richard Branson, first of all, always was famous for saying, know your weaknesses or know your strengths, but also know your weaknesses and then employ someone else to do them for you. So it's like bring in somebody that can do the job you need to do better than you and just pay them for it because it will save you time, energy, and you'll be able to focus on the things you actually are good at. But then it also comes down to, you are your biggest asset, and Nassim Taleb has got a great quote, which is that your uniqueness is your competitive advantage. So if your unique ability to be able to communicate with people, be a digital marketing secret weapon, to be a fitness trainer, to be a health guru, to be whatever, that if that's your strength and that's the thing that brings people through the door, don't waste your time focusing on posting on Instagram and doing this article and like whatever. Yeah, obviously there's some of that you may need to do, but ask yourself the question, what can I only do? So like, what can I only do? And then do that, and everything else you should just delegate across to somebody else, because I think that the time and money you'd spend with a VA or somebody else doing that, either an employee or someone, I think is going to give you much more into your business, because you'll be doing the things that actually move the needle for you in the right way.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. It's true.
So looking ahead, what's next for you, Josh? What's in the pipeline? What are you focusing mostly on with just yourself and your business? What are your key goals for this next year ahead?
Yeah, cool. So first and foremost, I think I'm going to try and take a couple of days to recoup. This year has been a successful year, but it's also been a very full on year, and I think I've felt the kind of fatigue kick in a little bit in the last couple of weeks. So I'm looking forward to a few days off. I've got my first child coming in a couple of weeks.
Congratulations.
So thank you very much. So that'll be a focus in January. And then I mean, moving forward, we've got a brand called leadflow, which was built through COVID, which we had the ability to oversubscribe really quickly, just based on, again, coming back to the reputation thing, the reputation for doing really good work, that stuff that kind of it stays with you. So we built a brand that kind of oversubscribed really, really quickly. So for us, we're figuring out how we enhance the capacity there of that business without sacrificing quality, without having any, for me, like, I'm OCD when it comes to making sure that everything that I do that has my name on it, it works, it's quality, and it's as good as it can be. Replicating that is often the challenge, without me working exorbitant amounts of hours and days to actually do that, and I don't want to do that as much anymore. So 2021 for us is a scaling, systemizing year where we figure out how to quality control and keep adding capacity to our sort of workspace.
Like that, it comes back to sort of just simplicity and looking at what's essential, really.
Yeah.
I harp on about his book, but Greg McKeown wrote, have you read the Essentialism book from Greg McKeown?
I haven't.
Should. It's a good book. It's it talks about the sort of the pursuit for less but better. Mm-hmm. So again, it kind of relates to what you were saying about, what is the thing that's going to help move the needle in the right direction in the most impactful way and have the most value to our customers and also to us, to not allow us to be working all hours of the day to get the same result. How can we do the same thing with less time? So yeah, it's a great book, and he talks about the philosophies of, it's either a hell yes or it's a hell no, and none of this in between stuff. And you only give a certain amount of energy to, if you give 10% of energy to 10 different things in a day, then you're going to only grow them at 10%. Whereas if you focus 100% of your energy on one thing, it's going to grow at 100% quicker. And then you can either decide whether that's something you're going to continue with or whether it's going to be something you drop. So yeah, good book. So yeah, maybe add it to the list for next year. But Josh, I just want to say before we go, thank you for your time. I think I've been inspired by not just your talks that you've done, but also just the way in which you've navigated this year and the businesses that you've kind of, started and adapted and pivoted because of what's happened. So thank you for sharing your insights and your knowledge with myself and everyone listening. Where can people come to find you if they wanted to learn a little bit more? Maybe they want to continue the conversation with you, or just reach out over something you've said today.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, buddy. So the easiest place to find us as a brand is leadflow.marketing. You'll see a little bit about what we're doing there. Coming back to the niche thing, all we're doing is lead generation via Score app scorecards. That's literally all we're doing. And as a result, we're currently the only agency on the planet doing it. And like I said, we're oversubscribed. So there's a trick there, and that's been going well. If you want to find me personally, LinkedIn is fine. / Josh Owen Smith, I believe. And I also do a lot of Facebook too, in terms of, my personal professional network. Probably a lot of people don't share my philosophies, but, how I interact with people professionally is how I interact with them personally. And I don't have any issues with, extending my Facebook, networking community with, people that I work with as well, or people just interested in me or my career or what have you. So, either is fine.
Fantastic. As I said, it's been a pleasure chatting to you. And look, if anyone listening would like to ask any questions or follow on the conversation, then you can reach Josh at those places, and I'll link everything in the show notes below. Or feel free to comment and share this episode with a friend if you think they'll find it helpful. But from me here, and I'm sure from Josh, have a great afternoon, and we'll speak to you soon.
Cool. Thanks, Jack.